Hey guys, Doc here with something a little bit different. I found a facsimile copy of New Fun from February of 1935. It was Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson's very first quote unquote DC comic. See, back then, you didn't have Superman. This was 3 years before you got Superman. And you got a bunch of different things. It's a pretty thick book, so we're just gonna flip through it and give you guys an idea of what these magazines look like at the time. So it says new comic strips talking about aircraft, radio, movies, stories, adventure, mystery, sports, and maybe even a prize. I didn't find one inside, so I'm gonna call it foolishness, but see, here you have things like Sandra of the Secret Service. Then you have a intro here. And it says, here's the new magazine you've been waiting for. Fun, speaking, stand by, all stations. I'm bringing you the first issue of Fun magazine. And this book turned into something very popular for DC, and it's an oversized book. This facsimile is the same size as the Treasury editions and things like that DC has been putting out over the last little while. But you get all these different cartoons that, it's not really what you're used to. You get Jigger and Ginger, Barry O'Neill by Lawrence Larrier. And then down at the bottom, you have an Oswald the Rabbit cartoon that seems to run through most of the book until you figure out what Oswald is up to. So get Wing Brady, Soldier of Fortune by D. Carasette, The Magic Crystal of History by Barry O. And a lot of these are very much comic books as much as cartoons. Judge Perkins by Burt. And A Telling of Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. So you get to see where Prince Valiant came in by Hal Foster. You get to see Sunday cartoons and things like that had been going on since before Little Nemo had been in the comics strips in the newspapers. And a lot of these even I'm not familiar with because I've always liked comics more so than comic strips. I like Peanuts. Peanuts is fine for what it was. Calvin and Hobbes, all of the Sunday strips, Dagwood and all those things, Garfield. But I like more than 3, 6, 9, 12 panels in one issue, okay? I need more than that in my life. But what's cool about this magazine is once you get through with the comic sections, then you get Spook Ranch, a Western mystery by Roger Furlong. And it's got art with it. It's got comic art with it, but it's a prose piece. Then you get to see ads like this. And it was much more of a magazine, almost like a Look magazine, rather than something that we're used to when we call it a comic book. See, here you have a sports page by Joe Archibald. And down at the bottom, you get how you can become a detective. You get the Charles Atlas ads that you would get even in the 1970s, 1980s books. The Insult That Made a Man Out of Mac. Like I said, there's a lot to go through, so that's why I'm not really stopping and going through everything. Here's a page about model aircraft, and it teaches you how to, build a model airplane. Then you get to talk about real, quote unquote, real aviation here with another ad from the wheel belt. Let's see. Popular Science. I'll have to dig into it and see if that predates the Popular Science magazine or if that's just what they decided to call it. Here's a section on stamps and coins. She got $400 for a $50. Get into these big pay fields. Electricity, learn radio, television, talkie pictures. Even one for young homemakers. And it shows here, a stooped body is like a king toes. You know, it just doesn't work right. Here's your streamline wagon, big guitar and banjo, Ivor Johnson's safety rifle. So if you get the opportunity to check this book out, it's really neat because it doesn't just show you cartoons like Bubby and Beevil or Peleon and Osa, but instead you get to see ads for these cool things that, you know, maybe you've seen them in comic book ads, you know, in later days. Maybe you haven't seen them. Here's Tom Mix with Ralston. Anybody remember what cereal Ralston used to make? Chex Mix. That was a Ralston Purina cereal. But here, it's advertising Ralston cereal. And it says, Jimmy and Jane keep strong and healthy by eating Ralston, the straight shooter cereal. And here you get an ad for a Dandy zip gun. So this was a nice little walk down history lane, folks. I thoroughly enjoyed getting to look through this, just like I like looking through old Look magazines, Life magazines. It's really a slice, not really of Americana as much as it is history. You get to see how big the magazines were, how big the comics were. And I'm sure at the time that it was originally printed, it was only like 10 cents. But this one here was $10, so we've had a little bit of inflation in the meantime. But this was New Fun, the big comic magazine, issue number 1. So I think this came out back in September, but I haven't, September of 2025, but I haven't seen it until now. But I'm gonna go back and reread through a lot of these strips and do some more history digging to see if any of these strips, you know, stayed in the magazine for any length of time. I don't really think any of them led to the creation of Superman or anything like that, but it was really fun to explore this magazine from a different time. Get to see where Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson was trying to get to, you know, by starting National Periodicals, soon to be known as DC Comics. So thanks for joining me on this little history lesson for a Treasury edition. This is one of the greatest hits of comics because it was one of the first greatest hits. This is the first time that a book of comics were really put together and meant to be an ongoing series more than just like a one-shot. So, like I said, guys, thanks for joining me on this episode of Greatest Hits. I hope you've enjoyed it and enjoyed this look at New Fun, issue number 1.